Okay, I'm back working on Godot, and now I'm trying to, going to add the shield again. So earlier today I was working on that. So I want to show you what I did. I decided, okay, well, I'll put the shield under the player because I'm starting to get a better understanding of how these node things work. So I figured, well, the shields can't exist without the player. So we'll put the shield under the player, and with the shield I decided to do was use a static body because I figured that would cause the rigid body of the enemies to bounce off. And then I was figuring, well, I'd probably have to write some code to get the static body to track with the player, but, you know, because I thought a static body would just sit there. But because I made it a child, turns out it tracks with it. So I added the static body, and then over here I added the sprite, which I just dragged the power ring over here, and you can see it goes right around the player sphere. And then I added a collision shape 2D, sized it up, and now I have everything. But to my surprise, like I said, it started tracking with the enemy, so that was kind of cool. So I'm like, oh, okay. So turns out for the shield itself, I didn't have to add any code for that. What I did have to do was modify the enemies, because I was trying to figure out how to get the enemy objects, remember the enemy, to well, the enemy code, there really wasn't much to it because the emitter would remove the enemy, so the enemy was just bouncing around for the most part. You know, I added the swarming code, but that's really only a few lines of code, so I said, well, you know, it'd be better if the enemy could, you know, keep track of it, whether its own self is alive. So I added some code to that and swapped some stuff around. So if we look at the code, what I did was I created a new function called die. Now I needed something also that would allow me to play out the animated sprite for an explosion, which are these PNG files here, which, let's go back to the enemy. If we look at the animated sprite and then click into here, yeah, you can see the default was this one set up, and then I added explode. So, and that would be the explosion. I also bumped up the speed, frames per second were like 5, and I was figuring, well, I'm only going to really probably show this for 400 milliseconds, or 0.4 seconds, which is about the length of the audio for the explosion, which I also added too. So we have the eliminate sound, so if sounds like that, which I used earlier for the emitter to eliminate, but now the enemy itself was going to have to be able to eliminate itself. So I created this function called die, and it would swap out or play the explode animation and then play the sound, and then it would start a timer. And the timer I defined up here is time to die. So I added a timer object. And I set my timer in code to 0.4, and then I connected it to the on time to die timeout. So when it came time to actually die, that it would just say, give the enemy name and the debugger, and then boop, it's gone. I just do the .q free and it eliminates itself. So that was actually pretty nice. But the enemy also had to determine when to die, or at least be told to die, or, you know, in this case, if it ran into when I added the shield, I needed code to tell the enemy itself to die. So here's where it calls the die from when it runs into a shield. So what I do is I loop through, or no, I get the body is passed in when the enemy body is entered. Take that body, get the name, see, is this a shield? And if it's a shield, then I can emit a signal, enemy dies, and then I die. I'm not sure if I do anything with enemy dies anymore because I was going to go a different way there. But, so now the enemy knows to die, and we can play an animation and a sound, and then actually remove the enemy from the screen. I also needed the ability to check to see if it's been told to die. Because remember, the emitter was doing the removal of the enemies itself. So if we jump over here to the emitter, I was originally killing the enemy here using this body.q.free, and the enemy would disappear. But I had a problem in that the emitter knows that it took something out. It knows it's an enemy. It knows an enemy destroyed. It actually has the enemy itself. So I figured I would just create an export variable under the enemy called die and set that to 1. So that when the enemy could come in and say, if die is greater than 0, set is alive and then die. I needed is alive because it has to start off alive, and then I don't want to have to, I didn't want it to keep dying if it was already dead, so I had to add an is alive and then set that to false when it triggered the die routine. So now I took care of the enemies dying, and let's see. Oh, another thing I did was I modified the swarming so that it would be something more along the lines of I just said if it's greater than 0, this exported swarm value. If it's greater than 0, that's when it swarms. Otherwise, don't set the applied force and stuff. So that should just keep it going as if until it runs into something else or something like that. Should, not necessarily, kind of weird how it works. Let's see. So game changed here. I had to have basically a thing saying, am I swarming or not? If I'm swarming, set the swarming to false, otherwise set it to true. And this is when the swarm timer. So now every time the timer for the swarming clicks over its 10 seconds, it either switches to swarm or from swarm, or switches to swarm or not swarm. So I had to put a switch here to say if it's swarming, go ahead. This code loops through all the children of the player node. Not the player node, it loops through the children of the game node, and then gives the location of the player to the enemy, and also tells it whether or not the enemy should swarm or not, which we already went over the code for the swarming and the enemy. So now I have the ability to swarm, shields. I haven't added code to actually turn off the shields yet. I figure it's going to be something that will be enabled, disabled. I'll have to send probably some type of timer so that the shields can only be on for a certain amount of time, and then recharge time. So I haven't decided if the recharge is going to be short or fast, or it might be a function of the level, because as you go through the levels on this thing, it's going to get harder and harder and harder to survive without the shield. So I may do something like that. But so we'll wind up. Let me go ahead and bring up the color and change this more to a black, almost black. There we go. It's close to really close. Okay, so we'll save that. What else do we want to do? Oh, player. Where did I have a game? Testing. That, although I think I might have to go in the HUD under game here. So let's see. So this is the game now. It looks actually quite similar to my other one. I can shoot around and you can see the time left to swarm, and they should start swarming right now. And now I have to get away. Boom! So then it'll turn off swarming. Like I said, it's doing some weird things. I also added, made sure the levels worked. And this is basically the gameplay. I need to, like I said, add the and like I said, every level it jumps up by 5, so that's what I've done so far. I'll have to do some fine tuning, getting the shields to turn off and on, and then I did run into some problems when I was doing this, and had a thing that keep resetting the level, but keep adding enemies. So within not a fraction of a second, less than a second, the whole screen was full of enemies overlapping everything. It was just a mess. I was afraid it was going to take down the system, but I was able to fix that. I'll have to add the HUD elements, like some kind of score. Not sure how I'm going to do the scoring, and then just test it out and debug it. And then after that, I'll call it pretty much done for now, which will be 1.0 or whatever. And then the next version of where I think it's a port of what my Java game is, I'll go through and then I can change it up and add functionality and things that I might want to do. So I have ideas, but if I was really smart, I would have written them down. But we'll see what happens. So that's all I got for today. Catch you later.